Healing for a dismissive avoidant attachment style does not look like becoming more needy. No, it looks like becoming more present. And in the next 7 minutes, you are going to learn 5 major signs that somebody with a dismissive avoidant attachment style is actually healing and trending towards true progress to becoming securely attached so that they can build and be available for thriving, loving, deeply connected relationships. And some of these things may really surprise you because a lot of them are not what you're going to expect. So let's dive in here. And I actually want to share with you some slides that really break this down so you can see this firsthand for yourself. Okay. So the analogy I always give to somebody when they have an insecure attachment style is we go through attachment trauma in upbringing. And it doesn't have to be big T trauma like these severe things, but think of trauma as basically anything that you couldn't properly process and make sense of. And so your nervous system reorganized itself around it instead. And so what happens is we essentially store these things and we reproject them. But let me give you a really clear example. I want you to imagine that tomorrow you walk into the woods and you see a bear. And the bear starts chasing you and you run for your life and you get away. But the very next day you have to go back into the woods. What does your mind do? Well, every time you hear a little rustle in the bushes or you hear some sticks cracking in the distance, your mind jumps to the conclusion. It goes, oh my gosh, there's a bear. And you'll feel your entire nervous system go into fight or flight mode and ramp up for this perceived threat, even if you don't see the physical bear. Now, why does this happen? Because this is how you've stored the threatening experience from the day before. And then your system is wired to literally project the threat back out onto reality in order to protect yourself. But let's say that this isn't about a bear. Let's say this is about your childhood. And as a child, you often felt trapped in an environment that didn't get your needs met, or you felt emotionally unsafe because there was a lack of attunement or a mirroring of your emotions from caregiver to you. And so you kind of felt just lost in the whole parent-child relationship, not sure if somebody was really going to stick around and be there for you. Or let's say you felt ashamed that nobody would meet your needs. What ends up taking place, and you see this for every attachment style, you think of anxious attachment styles who have this abandonment dynamic in childhood. And what do we do as adults? Oh my gosh, is somebody about to abandon me? What's happening? They didn't text me back. Oh my gosh, they're going to abandon me. Fearful avoidants often have a lot of trust issues. And so what do we do as adults? We go, oh my gosh, can I really trust this person? Should I be suspicious? Should I read between the lines? And dismissive avoidants go through the same thing. They reproject out that perceived threat, just like you would with a bear in the woods, onto the external environment. This is your subconscious conditioning. And the way to heal your attachment style, one of the biggest pillars that we have in integrated attachment theory, this neuroscience-backed method for how to truly change your attachment styles, you have to rewire these core wounds. Now, these core wounds can get rewired in many different ways. We have some tools that really dive into how to reprogram them most effectively and efficiently, whether it's abandoned, betrayed, shameful, defective, trapped, unsafe, any of these different wounds, depending on what your attachment style is. But what you'll see generally is that the dismissive avoidant, as they start to heal, they stop going through this dynamic of constantly feeling ashamed for criticism. In fact, they can actually take on criticism and hear people's opinions and viewpoints out without personalizing it so deeply. They stop fearing being trapped with every little request from a partner, thinking, oh my gosh, you're trying to trap me or take away from my plans for the day or my experience. No, they instead hear somebody out and they're able to communicate and set small boundaries. They stop fearing conflict to the point of completely shutting down because they feel emotionally unsafe. Signs that they're healing in this particular category, their first 1 out of 5 here, is that they stop constantly jumping to these conclusions. Okay. They feel a little safer in conflict. They feel like they can hold a conversation and try to work through something. They stop fearing being trapped all the time and instead know how to just communicate needs or boundaries, or don't jump to the conclusion that somebody's trying to trap them or control them. And they don't keep shaming themselves internally. And so they have more bandwidth for feedback and discussion about what's going on in the relationship. And of course, you'll see other really important things in here. Like they stop fearing being weak if they're vulnerable. They instead start being vulnerable and feeling safe and comfortable within that. And they don't jump to these ongoing conclusions like they're going to be helpless. And so why bother trying to change anything? They can't do it anyways. They just stop going through those same old cycles. Okay. So that's really pillar number one. And you can see this because somebody's actually doing the neuroscience backed work, but you can also just see this because somebody is making an effort to be self aware, to introspect, and over time they start creating these shifts and changes that allow them to have more bandwidth around these core issues. Here's the second thing. Dismissive avoidance, one of the biggest signs that a dismissive avoidant is healing is that they are actually able to communicate their needs or realize that they have them. So many dismissive avoidants, like if you say, what do you need? They will answer to you and they'll say, I don't need anything from anybody. I'm fine how I am. But the reality is that they do have needs, and needs are the lifeblood of relationships. They're the exchanges we make. And when our needs are met, we actually perceive this connection. And when our needs are not met, we start to feel like, okay, wait, maybe this is the wrong relationship for me because it's almost like a tree or a flower without sunlight. A relationship without needs being exchanged and met is a relationship without nourishment. And so dismissive avoidance, of course, the obvious, they say, oh, I want freedom, autonomy, independence. They want to keep the relationship to themselves, obviously. But they also really have these big needs to be accepted. In other words, to not be criticized, that they're okay with feedback as long as you do it in a kind way, where you don't make them feel so judged and criticized by the feedback. Appreciation goes a huge way, a hugely long way. If you're saying something like, "Oh, hey, I noticed that you're making an effort to have harder conversations in our relationship and show up for them. Thank you." Like just appreciating those small, sincere things. Empathy, understanding, harmony, safety, comfort, all these things are literally the biggest ways that dismissive avoidance intake needs in a relationship and feel the most connected. And so what you'll see when the dismissive avoidance starts to heal, either they are communicating these needs or they're really receiving them and becoming consciously aware of these things. So if a partner is giving these things, they might, light up and express appreciation. But truly, this is what you'll see dismissive avoidance fall into limerence over, like it fall into deep infatuation over. If somebody's giving these things in a relationship, it goes a long way. But of course, they have to be able to know that they need these things and express them too, because they're different for each attachment style. You'll see, for example, an anxious attachment style, a lot of their needs are more centered around validation, reassurance, having certainty. Like if you're canceling plans, you make plans again with them so that they have certainty. They want to feel wanted and like a priority. I mean, there's a lot there that's very different from these things here. Okay. Emotions. Okay. You will see dismissive avoidance in their healing process or journey. When they start to heal, they go from disconnection to connection to their own emotions. So they start realizing, and I think there's this very common myth where people say like dismissive avoidants aren't emotional. They don't have any emotions. That's not true. Dismissive avoidants absolutely express emotions, but they express them in a more compartmentalized way. And they definitely feel their emotions, but they constantly try to push them down as soon as they feel them. So rather than, and you can take it from anybody. Like if you look at a dismissive avoidant, a lot of times when you spend a lot of time with a dismissive avoidant, if they're not doing the healing work, they express a lot of irritation, frustration, impatience, numbness. You'll see them like get irritable very frequently. That's an emotion. They're emotional in their own way. They may not express like loneliness or sadness like an anxious attachment style, or anger or hurt like a fearful avoidant as much, but you're going to see irritation, frustration, impatience, a lot of these things, especially as it relates to people. So these are still emotions. They're still emotional, just in a different way. But you'll see them instead start to make friends with their emotions, listen to their emotions, recognize that emotions are basically messengers for feedback, letting us know that something's out of alignment. And rather than constantly trying to compartmentalize, they'll actually attune to themselves a little bit more. And it's a massive step of healing on their journey. Okay. So if you're seeing a dismissive avoidant start to recognize their own emotions, start to like speak up about how they're feeling about things, this is just a major sign that they are moving towards a lot more healing and a lot more growth. Okay. And so really important things to pay attention to. And then our last two pillars, and I will say, by the way, if you're somebody who's dating a dismissive avoidant attachment style and you want to dive into this in a lot more detail, we actually have a course that you can check out fully for free for 7 days. It is all about the dismissive avoidant attachment style and like their healing journey and basically the roadmap to all the things they need to do to heal in more detail. It's about an hour and a half long. It goes through all the different tools. There's a workbook. You can check it out fully for free. We have them for every attachment style, and I'll put a link below that gives you fully free access. And along with that, just for a limited time, as a fun offer or gift that we're giving away, you also get to keep our attachment styles and intimacy course for life. So it's all about how different attachment styles operate and and show up around sex, intimacy, closeness as a whole, and the things that cause them to pull away and the things that cause them to feel closer. And again, you get to literally keep that for free for life when you check out the 7-day trials. And that's valued at $250. So you can check that out and I'll put the link down below. But essentially, you'll see here that the dismissive avoidant, when they start to really heal, they go from having these extreme survival oriented boundaries where instead of saying, like, hey, I'm tired, can we stay in tonight instead of going out for dinner? They'll literally just cancel plans. They're like, sorry, not coming over. Don't feel good. And so they'll go from like, going through these extreme survival oriented boundaries that like push everybody away and instead into communicating about what's coming up, communicating when they want something to change or when they have a boundary, talking about what they need with a partner around their boundaries or sort of personal parameters in their lives. And you'll see as well that dismissive avoidants usually start by setting boundaries with their actions instead of their words. So they'll pull away or not answer a text, and that's their way of setting a boundary. And it's like, no, no, no. When they start healing, they'll actually communicate, hey, I just need some time to myself this evening. Let's do something tomorrow. They'll actually open up and talk about these things with their words instead of just pulling away completely and assuming that that's an expressed boundary. And you'll see as well, dismissive avoidants are often in a place where they'll disconnect so easily and be so inconsistent with communication. But a huge moving of the needle that you want to pay attention to is that dismissive avoidants, when they start healing, they're more consistent with communication. So they're more consistent, they're more vulnerable. They actually use their words to communicate more. They set smaller, less intense boundaries around things because they're able to express themselves more. They're less triggered with these types of emotions. They're more clear about their needs and how to share them with somebody. And they stop getting so triggered by these same old wounds because they know how to show up for these types of instances and scenarios instead. So, if you're the loved one of a dismissive avoidant, those are important green flags to look out for. And if you are not seeing these green flags, I always advise, hey, checking in with yourself. Are you feeling fulfilled in this relationship? Is this going well for you? And if you're feeling like it's really difficult or challenging and you're not seeing the needle move, you can set a deadline around the relationship. You don't have to stay in the wrong relationship forever if it's not for you. I think it's really important to give people a chance and an opportunity. So we set a deadline and we see, do they show up, especially if you're communicating your needs and being straightforward about what's going on from your side of things. And people are going to show up amazingly or they're not going to show up at all. And at the end of the day, somebody's actions and behaviors around this are going to show you whether or not it's the right relationship to be in. So that's it for today. Stay tuned for the later this week if you want to dive into some attachment style and nervous system videos on this channel. We'll be putting some of those up. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any, as well as so that you don't miss any of our cool giveaways or gifts we offer in terms of courses for free on here. And that is it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.